So, why do some relationships last? Social psychologists have spent a lot of time studying this. Why some get stronger, some deteriorate. Now, it's not about luck. I'm sure you guys know this. There are patterns here. So think about somebody you trust immensely. What are some of the qualities that make that relationship feel safe? Okay. Another question, can relationships survive conflict? And again, as we talk about this, just know that we're talking not only about like intimate relationships, we're talking about friendships, familial relationships, relationships with coworkers, relationships with your teammates, if you're on a sports team. Now, healthy relationships do develop through very intentional behaviors that build trust, understanding, and commitment. And one psychologist, Sternberg, proposed one of the most influential theories of love ever developed. So, yes, Robert Sternberg, triangular theory of love, 1988. So, he believed love isn't just one emotion, which I appreciate because it's a very difficult concept to, or a phenomenon to conceptualize. So, he proposed that love has three different components. So, one, intimacy. This is emotional closeness. It's when you feel understood, trusted, you feel accepted. And this is something that's going to develop gradually as you share your experience and you disclose some of the most important parts of your life to somebody else. Okay? Passion. You're excited, you're highly attracted to this person, you're physiologically aroused by this other person. This one, probably strongest early in relationships, naturally changes over time. This might be like the butterflies, feeling giddy, or the honeymoon phase of a relationship. Then we have commitment, the decision to remain invested in a relationship. This is dedication to a relationship rather than temporary emotion. Now, the interpretation of this, healthy long-term relationships often can include all three components, especially if we're talking about like intimacy, intimate relationships. But the balance naturally changes across different stages of life. So again, like we were talking about with the passion, that's probably going to encompass the first part of a relationship pretty immensely. But then as time goes on, it may be more based upon commitment. Or it might become more companionate in that you feel very close to the person and very committed, but it's not necessarily as passionate as it once was. And so the combinations of these three components, they create different forms of love. And it's not that the research generally finds, sorry, this it's converting previous again. Okay. Research generally finds, okay, friendship, communication, and commitment predict the longest term satisfaction more consistently than anything else in this triangle. So, okay, next thing, how do people become emotionally close enough to build intimacy? We have this concept called social penetration theory. Okay, think about your closest friend. Did you tell them your deepest fears the first day you met or your deepest, darkest secrets? Probably not. Probably not. So Altman and Taylor conducted research in 1973 and proposed this theory, social penetration theory, and suggest that relationships deepen through gradual self-disclosure. Again, like in onions, like layer by layer by layer. They compared personality to an onion with many layers. Again, early conversations, they're surface level, but as trust develops, you gradually share more personal thoughts, maybe experiences, values, emotions. And again, and just sort of quick, healthy self-disclosure is usually reciprocal, so both sides are kind of taking part in this. One person shares, the other responds. Over time, trust increases. So you meet a new roommate. Okay. Again, so maybe you just talk about like safe topics or like what's on TikTok. And then maybe okay, you explore effective exchange. Again, so let's see here. Oh, trying to think of other ones here. You go to another level and start to talk about, what happened that day. And then maybe you start to talk about what's going on in your personal life. Then maybe you start to talk about family things. Then maybe you start to talk about who you're dating or who you're interested in. And then maybe you start to talk about childhood experiences. And then you talk about again some of your deepest, darkest fears. And both of you were doing it. That is important. So these healthy relationships do deepen through gradual reciprocal self-disclosure, built on trust. Now, not everybody finds emotional closeness very comfortable. And again, researchers think that this happens early on in life. So, in regard to this, Aaron, well, Aaron and Aaron in the 80s proposed self-expansion theory, arguing that people naturally motivated to grow throughout life. And one of the main ways that we grow is through close relationships. And as relationships deepen, we don't just spend time together, begin expanding our own identity. So what this means is that healthy relationships introduce us to new experiences we might have never pursued on our own. So new perspectives on the world, new interests, new hobbies, new skills. Maybe we're going and doing and seeing things we've never done. Maybe we're meeting new people, trying out new things. And this becomes part of our identity. They also developed what's called the inclusion of other in the self scale. It's a measure using overlapping circles to represent relationship closeness. And basically, participants choose the pair of circles that best represents how connected they feel to somebody else. And the research does consistently find that people in close, satisfying relationships report greater overlap between their sense of self and their relationship partner. That basically connection of identity and relationship. And again, the circles don't mean you lose your identity within the relationship, but that healthy relationships involve incorporating another person's life and experiences and perspectives into how you understand yourself as well. Some examples. A friend introduces you to hiking, so it becomes one of the things you enjoy. A girlfriend, boyfriend, partner encourages you to return to school. You do it. Teammate inspires you to become more disciplined. You do. Spouse introduces you to a new culture or language, and you become interested. And so, again, research in general supports the notion that relationships that promote the shared growth and new experiences are associated with greater relationship satisfaction. A healthy self-expansion should never require losing one's values, independence, or personal identity, though. It's growth, not losing independence. So, let's see here. Okay, so let's look at attachment theory. Again, this is early in life. How do early relationships influence later relationships? And the initial research was done by John Bowlby and then Mary Ainsworth. Yes, early relationships shape how we experience trust, closeness, and security. Again, it's interesting to think about. Like some people naturally trust others, others struggle with closeness, and so where do those differences come from? So it comes from attachment theory. And Bowlby proposed children develop what we call internal working models of relationships. And these are based on early interactions with caregivers. So when caregivers are continually responsive to us, we develop a sense that relationships are safe and dependable, and we will get our needs met. If caregiving is inconsistent or unavailable, we might develop different expectations about trust and closeness. We might have more anxiety. We might not be able to trust that our needs will be met. Okay. And then Mary Ainsworth, um, she Do I have hers on here? I do. With Mary Ainsworth, I do have an entire slide of her research just so you can look at that. But she did a study called The Strange Situation in 1978. It was an observation in which young children experienced brief separations and reunions with their caregiver. She observed how children responded when the caregiver left the room and then returned. And these patterns helped to identify different attachment styles. So the results indicated that there were secure, anxious, and avoidant attachment styles. And the avoidant was later described as disorganized attachment. And again, these are not permanent labels. They are not static. They can be dynamic because later on in life, for any of us who have more disorganized attachment styles, things like relationships and therapy and life experiences and growth can influence attachment. So attachment styles can improve. So I just have to make that very clear. We remain capable of growth and change throughout our life, especially when it comes to attachment. And so when this research was done, okay, just to go through this, with secure attachment styles, this is what we hope for everybody. Research indicates about 2 out of 3 people do have a secure attachment style, and a child's general state of being with a secure attachment style is secure, explorative, and happy. So they're okay going and playing in the other room because they know that, if they need something, they can come back and mom's going to be there. So they're okay going and exploring. Because the mother's responsiveness, what happened there, to when a child needs help is quick, sensitive, and consistent. That means that she's feeding the child when the child needs fed, picking the child up when the child needs comforted. And so the result of that is the child understands that they can trust that their needs will be met. They believe their needs will be met. And that's how they move throughout life. Now, avoidant attachment styles, that's about 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 5. These kids are not very explorative. They're emotionally distant. And this is the result of the mother being more distant and disengaged because um, the child believes subconsciously that their needs might not be met. And so that's resulting in the emotional distance. Ambivalent attachment style, 10 to 15%. These kids are going to be anxious, insecure, and angry because they can't rely on their needs being met because the mother's responsiveness to when they need something is inconsistent. And sometimes they get their needs met and sometimes they don't. And so they don't know if they're going to get their needs met. Then you have kids who have a disorganized attachment style. These kids are depressed, angry, and completely passive, and maybe just non-responsive. They are confused and they have no idea how to get needs met because, and it says mother, I should say caregiver. This is an older slide. That's my bad. Caregiver, not mother, because the caregiver was very erratic. Sometimes the caregiver was frightened by something. Sometimes the caregiver was frightening. Sometimes the caregiver was passive and neglectful. Sometimes the caregiver was intrusive. So this kid has no idea how to even start to figure out how to get their needs met. So we have that. And then I won't go through this, but these are the 4 attachment styles that Mary Ainsworth came up with. Fairly, again, similar to Bowlby's attachment styles. And then we have the adult attachment styles. Again, this is kind of how these initial childhood experiences evolve into adult experiences. So again, we're always hopeful that most people end up with secure attachment styles because they're going to be more comfortable with closeness. They're going to trust others. They're fine. They're fine in relationships. They're fine on their own. They communicate openly and honestly. So they are going to be primed for pretty healthy relationships. Let me see here just quickly. Let's see here. Yep, they recover from conflict effectively. Anxious attachment styles. Value relationships deeply, but they worry about rejection and abandonment. They need a lot of reassurance. They overanalyze interactions. They become highly distressed when there is conflict. And again, that usually reflects fear rather than neediness. You have the avoidant attachment style. They usually value independence and self-reliance. They don't like being vulnerable. They keep their emotional distance and very commonly withdraw during conflict. And it's not because they don't care, it's just how they've learned to protect themselves. These are people that if they need to move a refrigerator, they're not going to ask for help. Disorganized attachment. This is much more complex. They desire closeness, but they fear it at the same time. Relationships can feel unpredictable because they experience both approach and avoidance tendencies as a result of their experience with their caregivers. And again, these are not personality traits. They're patterns of relating with other humans. It's not destiny. So just so we put that out there. And again, these attachment styles come out in friendships, dating, marriage, coach-athlete relationships, mentorships. And don't diagnose yourself. Don't diagnose family members. These are broad research patterns. Um, Therapists, in regard to these, therapist is the first person to talk to, especially in a more formal, evidence-based way. If you are interested, there is a great assessment that I have for this if you are interested to track attachment styles or give it a baseline. But they do help explain relationship patterns, even though we are very capable of growth, healing, and change throughout our entire life. Now, getting into, and there's more pictures here if you're interested, and more. So, what predicts relationship success? Gottman did some research on this. Thousands of couples interacting in lab settings that look like comfortable apartments. They discussed everyday disagreements while researchers measured things like communication, facial expressions, tone of voice, physiological responses like heart rate. And the researchers followed a lot of these couples over years to examine like what was the outcome of their relationship. And one of the most important findings, it wasn't findings was that conflict did not predict relationship failure, but certain communication patterns consistently predicted poorer outcomes. So this gets into the four horsemen criticism, which I do have on the next slide. I do have the four horsemen on the next slide. Um, and I'll explain them from the one previous, and then we can go to the next slide. Why is this like that? Okay. Apologies. So, anyways, the four horsemen. Okay, first one is criticism. This is when, okay, we attack the person's character instead of discussing the behavior. So, an example, you never care about anyone but yourself, rather than I feel hurt when contempt, mocking, eye rolling, name calling. This Gottman explained is one of the strongest predictors of relationship distress. It communicates disrespect and superiority. Defensiveness, not taking responsibility, excuses, counterattacking. Then there's stonewalling when somebody shuts down, they ignore, they walk away. Now, there are healthy alternatives to this. There are antidotes, which I do have on the next slide. So instead of criticism, again, like a gentle startup, contempt, appreciation, defensiveness, taking responsibility, and stonewalling, take a break and come back later. And the research has been replicated and expanded as well. And there's no model that perfectly predicts every relationship, but these findings do remain extremely influential in nature. So again, relationships are not going to be conflict free, but they are going to require respectful communication, repair, and mutual commitment to disagreements when they do happen. So I do have that all on this page. Now, relationship maintenance. Research does show that strong relationships are built through habits, not grand gestures once a year on Valentine's Day. It's what we do every day over time. And again, friendships, families, teammates, coworkers, romantic relationships. Trust, keeping promises, being consistent, communication, honest conversations, listening, gratitude. Researchers have found regularly expressing appreciation increases relationship satisfaction and connection. Sharing experiences, you create memories, work toward common goals. Respect, you disagree without attacking. Recognize differences. Uh, a lot of these behaviors have repeatedly appeared across relationship research. There are different theories that emphasize different mechanisms as to how we get there, but these are all predictors of healthy relationships. Um, and they're small, consistent behaviors practiced over time. Every day, small behaviors over time. Again, not grand gestures, buying somebody a car or a heart-shaped box of chocolates once a year. Small behaviors every day, over and over and over. Okay. Healthy conflict resolution. So again, every relationship's going to have conflict. Friends, families, coworkers, teammates. How do we respond to it? Okay, a lot of people believe that like successful relationships never argue. People never argue. That's just the opposite. Healthy relationships, they're gonna experience conflict. It's just how it's managed is gonna be different than unhealthy relationships. So listen to understand. That's one way to manage this. And don't plan your response where the other person is talking. Focus on understanding what they're actually saying. Make the other person feel heard. Focus on the behavior. Discuss the behavior, not who the person is. Again, I felt hurt when the meeting started without me. Instead of like, you are so inconsiderate all the time. Responsibility. Own your mistakes. Even partial responsibility. Work together. Okay? Shift from like you versus me to us versus the problem. We're going to solve this problem together. Repair. Gottman found that successful relationships make frequent repair attempts after conflict. Apologizing. Using humor appropriately. Appreciation. Checking in later. Can we start over? Again, the research does show respectful communication, emotional regulation, repair attempts. Those are associated with greater relationship satisfaction across friendships, families, and romantic relationships. So, just to wrap this one up, these are some things that you can just think about. Healthy relationships are not built through one grand gesture. Again, thousands of small interactions, listening, respect, appreciation, repairing after conflict, investing in one another over time. Those are the things that are going to shape friendships, families, workplaces, teams, and communicate and communities overall. And again, so social psychology, it doesn't just explain relationships, it really does give us the tools to build healthier ones. And that's where we will end today. I hope you have a wonderful day. We will talk to you soon.